As community professionals, we know that building cultures of fun and trust are valuable with our customers. However, how do these things lead to revenue growth and retention, customer loyalty? Today, we're going to be diving into the topic of how customer experiences can be built by fostering these things, and that there are measurable results that we can be communicating, and talking about how all of these things match up very nicely with customer experience work. Kalisa, let's roll the opening. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you happen to be. You've tuned into Talk About Your Community. I'm Todd, your host with Clocktower Advisors. And on this show, we bring in all manner of perspectives and disciplines to talk about the art and science of community building, and how hybrid communities, online communities, and in-person communities can contribute to the bottom line of organizations and businesses globally. I'm glad you're here and joined us. If you are here for the first time, we would love to hear from you in the chat. Please chime in and tell us where you're from, how you heard about us, what questions you have about building great customer experiences and the relationship with online community building. We're going to have a really fantastic conversation today. I've been having conversations with Christina Persson, my guest, all week, and I think we've got a really great show in store. So that being said, please don't be shy. This is an interactive show. We love to get questions. We'll often promote them up onto the screen, and we want to hear what your perspectives are, what your ideas are, and please contribute to the conversation. This is a community building program, after all. So before I bring my guest on today, just a quick note: the Talk About Your Community live stream show is on LinkedIn Live and cross streams over to YouTube and Instagram. And if you feel it in your heart that you've enjoyed the show, please follow us and like and comment on the stream on any of those platforms. Always appreciate that. The show is on every other week on Fridays at this time, 10 a.m. U.S. Central Time. And again, we have a lot of really awesome guests. In 2 weeks, I've got coming up a longtime colleague, past guest on the show and friend, Danny Weinstein, is going to be coming on to talk a little bit about his experiences of managing as a director of community, as a head of community for large enterprises, and what that means. Those of you who've been following Clocktower Advisors in the past, you know that we recently did a 5-interview series and a panel discussion around the role of the chief community officer, or the head of community. Danny is going to be adding his voice to this conversation and to this series, particularly because of his expertise at large organizations like most recently SAP, what it means to build out your team and an infrastructure around community, and how you communicate with internal stakeholders around all of that. So with that said, I do want to move over to Christina and bring her onto the stage here. I think she's having a little technical difficulties, so I'll just take a moment or two to introduce her and bring her on. Before I do, quick shout outs to some of our visitors. I see Todd Jones, a member of the Community Consultants Collective, has popped on along with someone else from the LinkedIn world. I can't see who that is, but sometimes LinkedIn hides that for me in the StreamYard chat. But again, welcome. Great to see you. Please drop in and say hello to everything that you're doing. I met up with Christina originally through a community called Fractionals United, and Christina is a product and customer experience leader. For 20 years, she's been driving global initiatives with organizations around their SaaS applications, their platforms, omnichannel services. She's worked with multinational organizations as well as startups, and she champions the idea that business value is rooted in customer value, and that a deep understanding of customers and their ecosystems is just the beginning of learning and engagement with those individuals. She is a people first person. She believes that success really hinges on creating a culture of fun and trust, our topic of conversation today. And she builds on her education at Carnegie Mellon University. I'm not holding that against her, being a Penn Stater myself. She is a lifelong learner, passionate about mentoring and inspiring others to achieve the extraordinary. Please join me in welcoming Christina to the show. Hi, Christina. How are you?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hi, Todd.
I'm so glad you're able to join. We've had a lot of fun talking over the past couple of weeks about the relationship between customer experience and the world of online communities, online community building, whether you're a B2B, B2C, or nonprofit kind of organization. I think maybe the too long didn't read of it is that there's a lot of relationship between the work that you do as a product innovator or product strategist and the work that I do as a community strategist and community builder. I thought it might be a nice place to start. I know I gave a little bit of your background, but I would just love, briefly for you to talk about like what put you on the path to an interest in product and product strategy and product innovation.
Oh, well, where do I start? I'll say that I've been on this path since I was in high school. Frankly, I went to a pre-college program at Carnegie Mellon for design, and I absolutely fell in love with it. I loved to imagine what the future could be, help people fix problems, come up with solutions, and really push the envelope. And that summer really changed the trajectory of my life. And I have really continue to love helping people, everyday people inside companies, whether it's, employee software or services and so on. That's never subsided. So that passion continues to today, and continuing to share that passion with others.
It's rare to find yourself on a career path that early in life. So it must have really resonated very strongly with you.
Very much, yes.
Yeah. So I thought just to kind of dive right into things, I would address the teaser that we used for the conversation today to invite people into this contemplation of fun and trust cultures and that connection with community building. We were citing some stats around, building a culture of fun and trust can result in, I have to read these because I can never remember anything off the top of my head, a 41% increase in revenue, a 49% profit growth, and a 51% customer retention growth. What's that based on? Yeah, what can we cite for that?
Absolutely. It's even when I read it, the numbers I thought were, to use your word earlier, extraordinary. But upon reading the study that Forrester came out with in the earlier part of the summer in June, it makes a lot of sense. And for those that are in the industry, who do the things that I do, it makes a lot of sense. And we can talk a little bit about the context, what's been happening in the market today, why that trend is going that direction. But I'm wondering if we should find out who's here in the audience to kind of see who we're talking to, and what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's great. We've had a couple of people just chime in on the chat to say hello so far. Todd Jones from Conway, Arizona. He is a community builder and copywriter who I know personally from the Community Consultants Collective. There's another individual here who I cannot see because LinkedIn is obscuring this person's name, and I apologize for that. But they say, super excited to be here, and let's go, Christina Persson. Kalisa, our engineer, is saying that's Chimeria is that person who that is. Got Bradley Felt from Milwaukee, Joan Vermette.
Yeah, I can see the comments now. I couldn't see them earlier. So thank you, Kalisa and Todd. Yeah, so it sounds like we have a mix of people from the community side, from the design side. So so to go back to your question, Todd, when Forrester came out with this research at the beginning of the summer, I'll just read a quote here because I think people are really curious about where these numbers came from. So they write, customer obsessed organizations reported 41% faster revenue growth, 49% faster profit growth, 51% better customer retention than those at non-customer obsessed organizations. And they've been running the study for 10 years. And this is the lowest they've seen these indicators within the technology and consumer market. And emotion is really one of the driving factors. They look at effectiveness, ease, and emotion. And we see these numbers. Organizations are having a really tough time trying to keep that customer experience index high. And again, for those who have been in the industry, we know what things have been happening in the technology field and why we're seeing that change now. I think those of us who've been in the industry maybe 2-3 years ago could see this trend from the inside happening, and the market is showing it now today. The good news is that even minor improvements on shifting towards being customer centric is going to make big gains for those brands that are trying to shift to be more customer obsessed. And so the big reveal is just that customer experience is really not just the product, it's the whole ecosystem. And ecosystems include online community, which I think is when, Todd, you and I started talking, we realized how much overlap there is between what we do in product strategy and customer experience and online communities. And I think that's when you thought this might be a good idea to open the conversation.
Absolutely. I think the light bulb went on over both of our heads as we started having that conversation. Certainly, there are other arrows in the quiver than online community, but of course we think community is a big one. And as I work with organizations, they most typically have, they've got their product marketing, they've got their brand stories they're telling, but that secret ingredient, in my view, tends to be having online community that enables conversations omnidirectionally between customers and people in the organization that are trying to deliver those products successfully, and those stories. So for me, it's very exciting to think a little more closely about this, because one of the challenges as I see it around online communities and those of us who build and manage these things for organizations is the need to build those bridges between what we do to encourage conversations and get people to join and share their experiences within the online community setting, and communicating that value to other parts of the organization. And customer success, customer loyalty, customer retention is a big stakeholder group to talk to internally.
Yes. So, you touched on a few things when we talk about ecosystem. Online community is just one of those. So when we talk about, again, product strategy, customer experience, it's not just that product. Those are things like your retail locations, phone support, email communications. It's also things like, what are your warranty programs? What's your customer service like? Loyalty programs, and so on. It's all pieces of that. If we can, would you mind if we talk a little bit about defining customer experience?
I think that would be really helpful to those of us that aren't coming directly from that world, who are on the stream, and to just kind of align with others who are here from that world. Would be great to hear.
Great. So we're going to get a little bit academic here, so I hope everyone's okay. And if we start diving a little bit too deep, Todd, you rein me in. I could geek out about this all day, and I get very excited about it. But if we talk about customer experience in terms of its universe, there are so many different areas that we can dive into. But for the purpose of the conversation today, I just want to dive into kind of two areas. So one is in what's referred to as the clock model. So you have pre-purchase, purchase, and post-purchase experience. So the experience is not just in that product itself. I'm going to say that over and over and over again. It's that pre-purchase experience with the brand, the purchase, and then the post-purchase. And we can talk a little bit more about why that's so important today. The other thing that I'll just give a little teaser on is a secondary framework, which that overlaps with, and that is product levels. So in product levels, we have the actual product itself. So for instance, in the idea of Volvo, a car company, the actual product is the car. And then you have the core product, which is at the very, very nucleus of that brand. The core product is that emotional connection, that psychological need. So for Volvo, that would be safety, peace of mind, reliability. And then you have on the outermost concentric circle, you have augmented products. And those are the things that we start going into that whole ecosystem. So if we have those two frameworks of core, actual, and augmented, and then we're thinking about that experience with the brand, pre-purchase, purchase, and post-purchase. And so I can dive in a little bit more about what's happening in the market today and why some of these things are shifting and why brands are maybe not responding as quickly as they should be. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, I think it definitely would. And I just to interject here, like I strongly relate to what you're describing about those different levels of product. It aligns with a book that I've been reading recently by a colleague by the name of Derek Weeks called Unfair Mindshare. I actually have a copy of the book right here. I'm not being paid for a product placement or anything like that. It's just a good read. But he talks about sort of like those three orbits of sort of the product level, the branding level, and then that ecosystem level, which he talks about being community-led kinds of initiatives. So yeah, but please proceed. Yes.
Sure. So when we talk about, if we go back to the study, they mention emotion, and we as humans don't make decisions based on logic. We make decisions based on emotion, and we look to logic to then back up our decisions that are made by emotion. And so when we are making purchasing decisions, whether we're a consumer or we're a business, in part that is emotion. And so back in the days of Mad Men, where advertising was king, that is how you brought in your revenue, was those advertising dollars. And you had to just make sure if someone got to that purchase point, that they put the dollar amount of that, the full dollar amount of that product or service on the dotted line and signed. Now, recently with subscriptions, this has now changed. So you're seeing a lot of very successful brands shift from investing those dollars in that pre-purchase program, shifting it over to that post-purchase experience. Now that's been happening for a while now, but there are some other things that are happening even more in the last couple of years, which is that costs are going up for everybody. And so businesses, consumers, they're looking at their expenses, and they are questioning every time they get that subscription, what value am I getting for this? Am I really getting what this is worth? And so this is why it's very important that we are really investing those dollars and understanding of that post-purchase experience. And so you need to connect with someone emotionally. It's not just, what is this thing? It's not just the veneer, but it's what's behind the scenes. And so I'll give the example of the dating scene, right? So purchasing is kind of like dating. You're at the pickleball court. You see a really handsome guy, really handsome gal, and you're like, oh, I really would love to get to know that person. And you go out on a date, and you're just smitten. But that, as you start talking to them, you realize that they're not really connecting with me. They're not getting me. It's just, it looks really great, but there's no substance. That is the exact same thing of what happens in that post-purchase phase of your customer's experience with your brand. And so let's draw this back to customer experience. In the last couple of years, there's been a lot of restructuring happening in the tech market. And again, for those of us who are on the call here who know, they know exactly what I'm talking about. And the investment of those dollars internally at companies are shifting a bit more. And things like customer research, discovery, really deep customer experience has been downgraded a bit. And we, again, like I said, those of us who've been in the industry, we've seen this. We're like, this is not gonna end well. So that's why now in the market today, we're seeing that customers are getting disillusioned. They're like, I don't want to renew, and they don't have that loyalty because they don't feel like the brand gets them. They don't feel seen. They don't feel heard. Mm-hmm. And again, this goes back to Todd, what you talk about in terms of online community.
It absolutely does. I will frequently talk with customers and clients that I work with, having them think about the online community as sort of the 24/7/365 focus group, that's always on. You're always going to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly of what they think about your product or service that you have to offer. And so so much of that value and so much of what you were talking about as emotional connection is what's enabled by creating those communities, provided that you are paying attention to just sort of the experience of the platform at the most basic level, the community as a platform. Is it easy to sign on to? Is it a trustworthy kind of space? I posted about this on my feed yesterday about it. That level of safety or trust needs to be met. The second level about transparency of the organization. What are their intentions? What do they want to see? What are they trying to drive as an outcome by convening this community space? And then there needs to also be an assumption of the benevolence of others within the space. So those customers need to trust each other in some way, shape, or form. And so those are really important elements that to pay attention to. Christina, I'm wondering if we can kind of pause, but someone had a question, and I think she's only able to come in for a short period of time, and I thought it might be neat to address it while she's with us. Dr. Judith Rommel writes, very timely topic, have to watch the replay. Right now, looking for the answer to, how can I cultivate that community as a startup or social venture? Are there right and wrong things to do? I love this question. I don't know if you had any immediate thoughts about it, but I can do as well.
Sure. So should I presume that Dr. Rommel, pardon my pronunciation, are you the founder or kind of?
It sounds possible. I know we're on maybe a 1 or 2 minute delay, so you
okay.
might immediately.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And in fact, I would say whether or not you're a startup or you're a larger organization, it's really about the same thing. And I've been in very small startups. I've advised startups. I've been in small, medium-sized companies. I've also been in Fortune 500, where I apply that kind of same philosophy, which is a couple of things. One is, and we mentioned this a little bit in the little blurbs enticing people to come today. But number one for me is creating a culture of fun and trust. And it's really about celebrating wins. It's about encouraging people. It's about becoming a learning organization. And what do I mean by that? I mean that when people fail, it's not a failure. We're learning. And that idea of learning is all about how do we all improve. I think those are very foundational things. But then to get more tactical, the other thing that I have found is breaking down boundaries around roles. So when I do brainstorming sessions, workshops, as soon as you walk into that room, you're leaving your title at the door, you're leaving your role at the door, and everyone is responsible for the success of that product, that service, that business. And so what does that mean? Great ideas can come from anyone in the organization. You don't have to have the title of engineer or product or design. Those ideas can come from anyone in that organization. That's number one. And that's something that I've been doing from like the very, very beginning, very first company that I worked with was creating that culture. The other thing is, in terms of breaking down those boundaries, is yes, people might come hired as an experienced designer, product manager, an engineer, but for me, I have played those parts in different parts of my career. Very early on, I was programming, I was building websites, and then I did a large portion of my career in experience design, and then evolving over to more product strategy. And so I have no allegiance to one discipline or another. And I feel that very intentionally, because having built my own startups, everyone is important. Everyone is coming to the table with different skill sets, ideas. And as long as everyone is strategically thinking together and they're all working towards that success, then that's when you really get that kind of mind meld happening. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that, and I listened to a podcast about a week ago that I thought was really interesting, where someone thinking very similar to the way that I do, is that they actually set their company and team goals, not at specific disciplines, but at the company level. So for instance, things like setting ARR and customer retention as like a core goal for every individual in the organization. So not just looking at, okay, how long is a bug sitting before it's fixed? Those are all great metrics, but that's not going to get us to ultimately that product and customer and business success. So looking at those larger business metrics as those metrics that everyone in the organization is working towards together to keep everyone accountable, everyone collaborating. Those are just a few things that I've seen work from.
I love that. And what I would add to that is to extend that into the community space, where your customers are stakeholders who can be contributors to those conversations as well, by setting the tone. Because Dr. Rummel's asking about, like, how do I cultivate community as a startup, by setting the tone of establishing that you see your customers as collaborators in building a great customer experience, by helping them feel seen and heard. As I think you mentioned a little bit earlier in the conversation, you're building that partnership, you're setting a tone for how that works. And I frequently express the idea of community building for an organization or product-based organization as kind of the backstage pass. You're being invited behind the scenes to sort of see, not necessarily how the sausage is made, but at least talk to the sausage makers about like what the product is like, and what you like and what you don't like, or what ideas you may have for other things. And that's a powerful opener, especially I think in startups or social venture organizations, where that collaboration is so very necessary. And by inviting those conversations, by inviting them to express even concerns and doubts, you're laying the foundation for trust with those individuals.
Yeah, and I would also add one more thing, which is that everyone on the team is responsible. Everyone's responsible for the success of that product. It's not just the product manager who's making the decisions. It's, okay, if you guys feel strongly that this is the way we should go, then show me how, show me why. What is that metric that we're going to together aim towards? And yes, it does take a lot of time and effort in the beginning. I get that. I've been in the trenches. What I will say to that is, you're going to pay a price at one point. Are you investing in the beginning and taking the time to really understand, number one, your users, but then also creating this culture and making sure everyone's kind of working towards that same overarching meta metrics? Or are you going to rush through that initial phase and have lots of silos and everyone's kind of doing their specific discipline, and then having to pay the cost down the road, where you're not connecting with your customers, where you aren't creating that sense of joy and fun within your teams to then collaborate and be creative, because that cost is going to come with losing your customers and having to go out and spend money retaining or acquiring your customers. So your customer acquisition costs go up later down the road. So you have to kind of think about where you want to put that cost, because you will be paying it. It just depends on where you're opting to as an organization. And it's fine either way. You just have to be conscious about which decision you're making.
I love that. The other thing that I'll just kind of add, and I think this applies very much to startups, but I would even say to larger brands to think about too. When you're starting those online communities, don't worry about launching it to like the 1 billion customers that you have. Like I think a lot of organizations will look at what they see as successful online community experiences and see like that there's multiple subgroups and there's, different discussion forums for every product line that they happen to have. But you have to realize those things were not built overnight. And the better approach tends to be an emergent design approach. I know David Spink's one of the names in the community industry space, has a series that he's been writing about this whole idea of emergent community design. And I agree with his ideas that better to invite in 15, 20 people to begin with who you think are proponents of the brand, that really like what you're doing, that are, I consider them friends and family, that you know that you're going to get more candid responses from them. They're going to offer their thoughts and ideas. And then as you start to gradually increase that circle of people that you're inviting into the community, they're seeing a warm conversation that's already happening. You've already set the tone for the space. And so you're laying the conditions for success around that. We've had a couple of other questions come in. Christina, you want to attack some of those? Because I think they're all kind of relevant to things that we wanted to touch upon today. I'm going to add Jason Popko had a question here. Can you talk about the difference between community as a culture or idea versus the tactics of platforms and tech stack, like people's process and tech of building an online community? I can certainly address this. I know, Christina, from your perspective as having been in organizations like Autodesk that have online communities, if you have anything you see that you'd like to add about this, you're my guest. I invite you to speak first.
Go for it. The online community. I mean, this is an open fireside chat. So
I love questions like this. So I think building community as a culture idea, it's got to be like when I sit down and talk with organizations at the outset about their desire to build an online community, I usually want to dig into why they think it's a good idea. Like what are they trying to achieve from it? Why do they think that it's going to be valuable to them? And just to try to unpack, why it's going to be good. Because I would say, and I don't mean this in a reductive way at all towards, say, accounting software, but it's an easy example for me to pull down. Why do I want to build a community around your accounting software product or on your mergers and acquisition software product? Well, it's not so much about the product. Community, the idea of community is never about the product itself. It's about connecting the people in that space. It's about how much they maybe identify with the brand or the use of your product that they get excited about. People care about the idea of Apple products, not about the product necessarily. It's like, yes, it's a pretty product. I like it. I use it. But by using it, it implies, or I add some sense of what the value of that is to my own personal identity because I'm using that product. And so that community building concept, I want to understand how closely they're trying to align that product with some idea of identity. And then from there, we can start to build out the kernel of what community is really about.
May I add on to that?
Please.
So, every time you and I chat, I always get a little like warm and fuzzy feeling. So you talked about that online community is not about the product itself. It's about connecting with them. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about the product levels, right? So the actual product is the product, but the core product, that's the emotional connection, that's the psychological need, that's the identifier. Who am I as a person, and does that brand match who I identify myself as? And so number one, I love that connection. And it emphasizes, again, how much we need to think about online communities when we're talking about product. And the other thing that I'll say is also from a discovery and research and knowing your customer perspective, being able to do that and getting those insights are extremely valuable for exactly what you're trying to do. And if I may say one more thing, which is, I think part of the reason why you and I thought that this would be valuable is because, at least in my experience, by the time the product design and engineering team have released a version of the product or the service, they're on to the next thing. They're on to the next, onto the next set of features, on the next release. They're on, and they're not thinking about, oh, wait a second, this is going to take a minute for the market to see. The online community is kind of further down the timeline, and the product team is generally like moved on. And I would say, and this is kind of an ask of myself as well, is to just remember that just because you're moving on to the next release, you've got a whole other cascading set of things that are happening, and reaching out to that online community and kind of, again, that collaboration piece, that making sure that what you're doing in the core of your product and your intention there is a common thread through all stages of your product and your brand experience, and everything through that ecosystem of the brand. So
I love that focus on the emotion and of the core product is it just comes up again and again, I think, in community building. I know a couple of years ago, one of the other big voices in the community building space is Richard Millington from Feverbee, who I used to work with, and he was talking about sort of building emotion into communities. Like what are the key emotions that people feel from interacting with your brand and with your products that you have. So I think that's something that comes up again and again to haunt us. I think this is a great transition because we were going to talk about this anyways as a topic, but sort of that idea of connecting with other individuals through the organization. Joan is asking this question about what about building internal community, building culture of in I know that in some of our conversations this past week, you were saying like the customer experience team isn't necessarily living in one place in the organization. And so this idea of, building an internal community, I think, is a really key one, because you and I were talking about like, how do we build these bridges when there's not necessarily a cohesive department of customer experience that's there?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, different organizations have their internal teams structured differently. Sometimes you're in pods where multiple disciplines are all collaborating together. Others are siloed per discipline. So engineering has theirs, your QA has theirs, and so regardless, the multiplier of people certainly is expansive. And one of the things that I would say is just, the first step, and I've done this multiple times in my career, the first step is just reaching out and saying hello. And my example is, one of my first examples, when I was with Autodesk, I noticed that there were these QA engineers, quality assurance engineers, that were kind of like over there. They were on the other side of the building. I didn't really know who they were, and I wasn't seeing them very often. And I just went over and said hello and just started having a conversation with them. And I realized, oh my gosh, these QA engineers know everything about the software. They know the software, they know the domain. This is amazing. And even if they've been with the company for 10 plus years, they're a wealth of knowledge. And so I immediately was like, I'm bringing you guys in for our next brainstorming session, our next discovery, and that really set a tone And other people in the organization started realizing, oh, wait, we're like in a design phase, but we're pulling QA in here. And it was incredibly valuable in terms of having insights, figuring out what that kind of that next release of the software was going to be. And I've really taken that just throughout my career. And so that's the first step. I know it sounds really small, but all it takes is one small step. So I was just thinking about the book Atomic Habits. If anyone's read that, right, it's all about one small step. And if you just do one micro step at a time, it's amazing how that 1% upon 1% upon 1% can just grow. And that's where you get to circle us back to our original metrics of the 51% customer retention, growth, etc. And just saying hello and inviting them to the table.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of DTDT, do the damn thing. Just take that first step, reach out, say hello, and get connected. I think too, just to kind of address that question of internal community building, platforms can absolutely help with that. With our increasingly remote teams, people geographically everywhere, working together, having a Slack space or a Microsoft Teams space or a dedicated internal community for your people to collaborate, that can exactly enable, I think, what you were describing, Christina, which is bring people together and kind of make that sort of like those brainstorming sessions are great levelers. There are no titles when you enter that space. That it's just people offering their ideas from their perspective and trying to come up with better ways to. Man, we're kind of burning through the hour here, and I'm mindful. I think you mentioned you maybe had a giveaway in mind for participation on the stream today. Do you want to talk about that for a moment?
Sure, we can absolutely do that. Yes, so I think Kalisa, she's the engineer behind the scenes. Thank goodness for her. If you want to put that out there, so I'm offering for like the first 3 people that sign up with and book time with me. You get a free full hour to just ask me anything about product, customer experience. I'm sure there are questions that we're not able to get to right now. If you disagree with me on something, I would love to hear that and talk about it, because I believe, and this again goes back to the kind of cultures that I like to set up, is that I believe that that questioning and like those doubts, and that's where the magic happens. Like when, okay, tell me more about that, and really then starting to see eye to eye. And on that note, I would like to say one more thing on that, which is I've also seen in organizations where leadership sometimes can be, I don't want to say the word scared, but scared about potential disagreements that they might have with the end users, people who might not like what they're doing. They have a loud voice and they're worried about them. They're like, oh no, this is not going to be bad. This is going to be bad when we release this. They're not going to be happy. And my whole thing is, let's find those people now. Let's bring them into the conversation and actually make them part of that initial product definition phase, and really kind of understanding, where the doubts are coming from. They might have a really valid concern that we'd never heard of. And so that's the other thing that I really try to do, is bring those people who are maybe a little bit combative, really don't like change, especially in an organization. People don't like change. And I am all about helping people through that change, because if we don't change, we die. Not to be
No. I just to add to what you're saying, like I often feel like the people who seem like they're complaining the most loudly, especially in professional contexts, they're usually the ones who care the most deeply about the product. Like the reason they're shouting is because they really think they've got something and they want to talk about it. And now maybe it's a matter of giving them perspective and understanding, like, this is why we can't do these things. But helping them to feel seen and really listening to them can end up being a great value driver for the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really glad you added the point, because it's true. It's absolutely true.
Well, Christina, as we're kind of sort of winding down the conversation here and thinking about next steps, if I'm with an organization and listening to this conversation today and thinking like, wow, okay, I would really like to get a community program going. I'd like to really sort of start planning for my customer experience. Are there some practical steps you might be able to point to for getting started?
Sure. So, I mean, some of those things that we talked about earlier, right, where really just taking the first step, asking, someone who maybe learn about, a different discipline that you're not interacting with on a day-to-day. There's a wealth of knowledge throughout the organization, and it's just about getting to know your team members. I would say that's one. The other is, again, going back to maybe taking a look at how you have your team goals set up, such that across disciplines, the majority of your goals are actually the same. And so that you're working towards those business level metrics, and that you make sure everyone's competing for the same goals, not competing against one another, and getting pulled in multiple directions. Also with the shared responsibility. So not just having one person in the room who's making the call, but if you are that person who traditionally you've been that person who is responsible, you're making a decision on what's happening in this product, in this release, reaching out to that team and saying, does this make sense to you guys? What have you been seeing? The other thing that I would mention is, and again, I've done this from the very start of my career, is inviting different people to even your market research, customer research, your discovery sessions, your usability testing sessions. So number one, I always invite the engineers, and I include them in that process. And that alone is incredibly valuable. And like I said earlier, I appreciate everybody's contribution to the success of a product in a business. I really don't have allegiance, and I believe everyone comes to the table. As long as you're hiring really smart, creative, adaptive individuals, like, let them run with it. Give them that trust and empowerment to do what they do best.
I love all those things. Just to kind of summarize them as I'm thinking about them right now, some of those practical steps are cultivating that mindset of learning and curiosity, having shared goals and responsibility for going after those goals to create that solidarity of the team, inviting a diversity of viewpoints, especially the engineers. I love that. Very actionable. And then finally, the trust, letting them run and do the thing they're going to do. Just to kind of put a bullet point on the end of that, really embracing that sense of fun about it too. Like when you reach some of those goals, when you hit the milestones, when the team comes together and the light bulb goes on, don't forget to pause and take a breath and celebrate
Yes.
those moments, and celebrate the people on the team who are offering their diversity of viewpoints to things, and acknowledging the difference that's made, in the success of the organization. I think that for me, underscores that whole that whole trust environment that we've been talking about creating through all of this. So yeah, I love it. Christina, any closing thoughts as we kind of wrap up the stream here today?
I'll repeat what I said earlier, which is that every time you and I chat, I always learn something new on what you're doing. And it's a pleasure. You've taught me so much about online communities that I did not know before. So I would just say, if there's anyone here that would love to learn more about online communities, Todd, you're a fantastic individual. I know you also enjoy mentorship as much as I do. It's been fun.
It has absolutely been fun. And thank you for everyone who stuck with us through the conversation here today and who contributed wonderful questions. I will say, although I can't type responses during the course of the stream here, I do go in and look at the questions afterwards, and I try to respond to every single person substantially, both on LinkedIn and YouTube as well. And so thank you thank you for your participation, for collaborating with us here today and building a sense of connection with each other. And I would also underscore that Christina is absolutely a stellar thought leader in the community experience space, or the product strategy space rather, and I would absolutely encourage you to reach out to her and connect with her on LinkedIn for some further conversations as well. That being said, we are cruising into the weekend. We will be back here in 2 weeks on September the 6th with Danny Weinstein talking about being a head of community for a large enterprise organization, building your teams. How do you create trust? How do you create fun and culture? Just to connect with what we're talking about here today. Be back here. Then in the meantime, be good to yourself, take time off, get away from the screens for the weekend, and then take a breath outdoors and enjoy the summer air while we still got it. And we will see you back here again soon. Until then, be well. And Kalisa, let's roll the credits.